It takes a special synthesis of leadership, forward-thinking vision, and talent to make an impact in today's world of media. And with a 2016 Emmy Award nomination under his belt, and his work with celebrities such as American Ballet Theatre dancer Misty Copeland, Carolina Panthers quarterback and NFL MVP Cam Newton, and television networks such as Aspire, TV One, and Bravo, it's apparent that New York City-based filmmaker and television producer Eddie Bailey has the patent on this coveted recipe. In addition, his documentary film, Memphis Majic, offers an unprecedented look at one of America's most culturally rich cities, while cementing his company, the Savoy Media Group, as an industry force to be reckoned with. Bailey was once an in-demand production assistant with networks such as MTV, BET, and it wasn't long before he transitioned from production assistant to story producer. He excelled in his new role on various episodes of television series such as Tabitha's Salon Takeover by Bravo and I Married a Baller by TV One. Ultimately, Bailey's goal with the Savoy Media Group reaches far beyond just creating compelling stories, and he's convinced that it's his mission to imbue his passion with a deeper sense of purpose at such a critical time in history. Well, Eddie, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into this crazy business? What's your background?
Okay, so I knew at 6 years old that I wanted to be in film. I would watch movies and I would always imagine myself being there, but not in front of the camera.
Wow. Really?
And so eventually I realized that, being a filmmaker is what I wanted to do. So I went to Howard University and I majored in film production. And yeah, I graduated from Howard and I came to New York and started doing film. But that's like the short story of it. There is actually kind of a longer, more interesting story to how I got to New York. So when I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had a film degree, but I was working at a restaurant in suburban Washington. I got fired from the restaurant because I just wasn't into the job, and it was a pretty good restaurant. It's called Daily Grill, and anyway, that kind of motivated me and pushed me to pursue my dream in film. So I called a friend who was living in New York, and he worked at Goldman Sachs. And I said, "Hey, man, I'm coming to New York. Do you know of any places or any spots where it's really cool to stay?" And he said, "Well, you can just stay with me." I said, "Really?" He said, "Cool." And I said, "Yeah, I would definitely do that." And so I didn't have any money. I had about $30. My mom gave me 30. After I bought my Amtrak ticket, I had $30.
Wow.
My bank account had closed down. I lost my cell phone because I couldn't pay the bill. And I remember buying at the DC Union Station. I bought like a Sbarro pizza and a magazine. And so by the time I got to New York, I had about $20. And when I got to New York, first couple of days I was there, I got plugged into someone who was working at, I think he was working at MTV. And they gave me a job as a PA. And ever since then, I just kept the ball rolling. You know how it is. And when you're freelance and when you start off as a production assistant, you get jobs by word of mouth. And and ever since then, I've been in the film industry.
So what made you at 6 years old want to get into film?
I don't know. I think it was the excitement. I think it was the excitement more than anything. I like the fact that, I like good storytelling, and I think good storytelling is really underrated. I think that a lot of times people pay attention to the cinematography and the action of film sometimes, but I think that it's in the stories that we tell that make people gravitate to a certain film. Like if you have a certain movie that's your favorite movie, usually it's not the effects that you gravitate toward. It's really the storyline, and that story in some way captures you. And I wanted to capture people by telling stories from my perspective, from my experience. And so, yeah, I think that's why.
Had you seen something that really like stuck with you or that really, got you thinking about what it was to create those films?
Not really. I mean, I was always a storyteller. I always wrote stories. I got in trouble in second grade for writing an action film, which was like my kind of like my first script. And I was in this Costa Rican jungle, and I don't know. It was kind of it was kind of nonsensical, but it had a lot of cursing in it. But I like the fact that it was. I wrote about an adventure that me and some friends had to conquer. We had to conquer the rainforest. Um, and so I used to watch, but this is like after I was 6. But I used to watch Steven Seagal movies a lot. And Steven Seagal, you remember him running with that little ponytail,
Oh, yeah.
and that's what I kind of remember. But I don't know. I mean, that's a really good. It's something that I never really thought about. But the only thing I can really tell you is that I just like storytelling. That's it. I don't know.
So I'm curious, tell us some of your projects that you have done or working on. And then as a director, how do you work with your talent? How do you bring the best out of talent?
Mm. So the project, my latest project that I worked on is a film called Memphis Majic. That's Memphis and then Magic with the J, Magic. And that film documents the city of Memphis, the historical aspects, the racial aspects, and the socioeconomic aspects of Memphis through the lens of a 30-year-old Memphis-born street dance called juking. Now, if I explain juking looks like urban ballet. And so I'm originally from Memphis. I was born in Memphis, raised in Atlanta, on the outskirts of Atlanta. And, now I'm here in New York. But when I would go back to Memphis, I would see this dance and I would be, in awe, in amazement by it. And the first thing that I would think about was, first of all, how long has this dance been around? 30 years. It's been around for 30 years. So why isn't it like a household name like breakdancing? Because it's so beautiful. I mean, these guys are in, just Nike sneakers on point, doing like 2 and 3, revolutions. Like it's amazing. And so they would say that the answer would be, well, Memphis doesn't have a lot of avenues. And I said, oh, okay. So this documentary that I want to do about this dance, because I love it so much, is really not so much about the dance, but it's really about Memphis and how Memphis can produce something so beautiful and the world still not know about it.
Yeah.
And
That's
so yeah, and so that's how I came up with Memphis Majic. And magic is actually a title of irony, because the magic never really got a chance or an opportunity to grow in Memphis because of all the injustices that happened in the city. King was killed in the city in '68. They had several riots in the city in the during the Reconstruction era, where the Union soldiers were trying to protect some of the black citizens, and Southern white mobs just came and just did what they wanted to do. And so, Memphis has a very long history of racial injustice, but it also has a history of good music. I mean, when you think about the blues, think about Memphis. Although the blues is, doesn't have a specific place of origin, besides just the vastness of the South. A lot of people consider the Mississippi Delta the home of the blues. And if you think about the Mississippi Delta, you kind of think about it like the Mississippi Delta would be New Jersey and New York would be Memphis. Right. So they're right there connected to each other. And so when, blues musicians and just, people in general would come from the Delta, the first place they would go is up the Mississippi River right to Memphis. So, that culture is just kind of like, that is inundated throughout the city. I mean, when you go to Memphis, when you go to Beale Street, you know, which is Beale Street is like the home of the blues. I mean, you feel it. It's like in the air. You know, it's you know, like when you come to New York and you feel the excitement and the fast pacedness of the city, it's certain energy that's there. Same thing with Memphis. You know, it's a slower energy, but it's a very heavy energy that's there in the city of Memphis. And so, yeah, that's what the city of Memphis brings, and that's why, you know, I wanted to do Memphis Majic, and I got Memphis Majic done. It came out. It's already out actually on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV, Tubi TV, where you can actually see it for free with ads. So yeah, that's my latest project, and also I'm working on some other projects too. So.
So, as a documentary producer, director, writer, um, I know I work in a studio, right? I'm Good Morning America. I work in a studio, but let's talk about working with talent, because the people that are watching this
Right.
want insights of how they could be better on camera. So what you're doing is on location. You're grabbing activity, dancing, whatever.
Right.
But assuming that you're having sit down interviews too and asking
Right.
questions. So talk to us about the sit down interviews and how you get the most out of your talent, out of the people.
That's a really good question. So I think when you do sit down interviews, the first thing you have to, as an interviewer, and you know, a producer, because when you're doing a sit down interview and you're directing the conversation, you know,
Right.
at that point you're not only directing, but you're kind of, you know, producing this thing. So I think the first thing you have to do is, you know about the subject that you're talking about. And you don't have to know every single thing about it, but you have to be knowledgeable, you know, to the point where you feel comfortable talking about it. That's number one. Number two, I think that what I do is I get the interviewees comfortable. I tell them that, you know, this is a conversation that we're having. So it's not just me asking you questions. It's really just a conversation between two people. And I want to learn more about your world, your experience, and you're going to tell me.
Yep.
And, you know, I guess when I ask the questions, well, what I do is like, I write the questions down that I want to ask. I have a small script, like basic questions. And then I think that, you know, where the magic of the interview comes out, pun intended, is in the follow-up questions.
Sure.
You know, so someone will answer a simple question, but then they'll say something that you didn't know. And so I follow that up with another question, because that can lead somewhere. And I think also too, you know, I'm an editor too by trade. And so when I'm asking questions, I'm asking them not just to get information, but I'm looking for the story in what they're telling and the information that they're giving me. And so if someone gives me an answer that I think that can connect, you know, to something else that I want to tell down the line, I'll try to connect those two in some way by, you know, asking them a question that, you know, produces that kind of answer. And so I'm just not asking questions, but I'm always looking for the story in what they're saying, and how what they're saying connects to, you know, what I'm doing, you know, in a broader sense.
I think that's such a great point too, because we've been trying to talk about how, as an interviewee, that, you know, it's important to also listen and be a part of the dialogue. You're always having in your head what you want to make sure you get across, but it really should be a dialogue. And not only because you want to be listening to the person asking you questions and really engaging in a conversation, but it's easy to also sometimes have your goals. You know, if you're an expert, for instance, and you're talking about, you know, the latest jobs numbers, and the interviewer doesn't, you know, hit on something that's important, there are ways to, you know, make sure that you bring that back to the conversation to say, you know, that's a great point, and it really supports the
Right.
numbers that we just saw, instead of
Exactly.
just trying to think, am I answering, am I asking, but to really
Right.
engage. The best thing that people want to see is a dialogue.
Right. And I think that, you know, you get a better interview like that too. Like, so I think that it's important to note that, it's not just a script that you're following. You have the pieces for what you need, but it's important that you just let it flow, just like a conversation. Just let it flow. And especially if you have someone who is not so comfortable on camera. You don't want to be so what's the word for robotic, I would say. You always going to ask the basic questions because you always need those answered. But
Yeah.
then you just want to just talk to them. And for those who don't do a lot of interviews, this is what I always say too, because my questions are never on camera, just answer the question in a complete sentence. That's something I know Eddie knows about that. That's something that we kind of prep the talent all the time before we start the actual interview. So yeah, it's really just having a conversation with them and just making them comfortable as possible, and talking to them. And you're talking, and usually when you're talking about them. You're talking about
Right.
what they do. And so it makes it easier for them to open up, especially if a little something about what they do. They really like to talk. And usually what I do too is I ask simple questions, but I ask them about themselves first. I don't know, how you doing? How was your day? What do you like to do? How did you get, like, real personal questions so that they can open up? Because a lot of people like talking about themselves.
Right. Plus it breaks the ice.
It breaks the ice. So, and then after that, I go into the things that I want to get into.
What did you learn when you were interviewing people for Memphis Majic? What were you surprised about, or did you learn something that you went, wow, I didn't expect to get that kind of insight?
Yeah. So Memphis Majic, I didn't say this before, is a documentary. And so with a documentary is a living organism. It's not like a script where, everything is on paper and, you kind of know how things are going. At first I kind of had this idea that Jukin probably had some roots in New Orleans and came up, through the Mississippi or through I-55 somewhere. But no, it didn't. And then I also thought too that Memphis Majic has a strong political element to it, and I didn't think that the political element would be so strong at first. But in digging into the history of Memphis, it had to be. And so those are the things that you kind of have to, as a director of a documentary, especially, you have to be flexible with, and you have to let the story kind of lead you in a way, instead of trying to, can have control over it, but you just kind of let it lead you to where the story wants to go, instead of you trying to tell a story that's not there.
I'm kind of curious, when you were working at MTV and you started out as a PA,
Yeah.
what kind of overall experience was that? Because, we've talked to a lot of people that have come from newsrooms, from, national newsrooms, local newsrooms, from a lot of different standpoints. But that's a really specific kind of television that's also evolved quite a bit since its inception. It's a lot different today than it was when I remember the very first, yes, I'm that old. I remember when MTV launched. What kind of environment is that? What kind of vibe was behind the scenes there?
Wow. I mean, as a PA, at first, I didn't really work in the office. I was what they called a floater. So I would do pretty much everything. But I would say that if I had a main job, I drove cube trucks, and cube trucks, 15 passenger vans. There was a place, I don't know if it's still there, on 40th and 10th. It used to be called CC Rentals. And that's where you get all the good vans. They'll always beat up. You could always scratch them up. You wouldn't get, your insurance wouldn't get hit or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, so I guess to answer your question, the experience was an experience of humility. if I can,
Mhm.
because as a PA, I think that you kind of have a clearer view of kind of what direction you want to go in,
Mhm.
because you can talk to the camera guys, you can talk to the audio guys, you can talk to the production coordinator, manager, producers, post-production folks. And I think being a PA is a person's time to figure out what you want to do in the field. That's what I think more than anything, you know.
What I'm curious to ask you, because most people don't go from PA to director.
Yeah, right.
So somewhere, um, did you have an actual paid job as a director, or did you have a staff job,
Mhm.
or your directing was yourself, your own budget, your own money, doing your own thing?
Right. So the when I became a director, that was my own thing,
Mm,
and the first thing that I direct was Memphis Magic.
okay,
Now the my trajectory as a PA to directing, is a little all over the place,
okay,
because I was such a good PA at one point that everybody just wanted me to be a PA.
sure.
Mhm.
And so at some point I had to stop taking PA jobs.
Yep.
And because that's what people knew me as. I knew that I had the skills to be a producer or a director, but other people didn't. And so the first job that I got that wasn't a PA job, let me think. It was probably an AC. Yeah, it was an AC, and then I did little office PA stuff and little production coordinator stuff, and then I was a story producer for a couple of shows. For I Married a Baller that was on TV1 decades ago, like a
I
few years.
remember that show.
You remember that show? Yeah, yeah,
I'm not saying I watched it, but I know.
yeah. I was, and then I was a story producer for a couple of episodes for Tabitha Salon Takeover. So there was a point where I didn't work, not work at all, but I just didn't work that much,
Mhm.
and that was the point that was my transition period. Um, and so I used to go to this church and this is the church where I married my wife Andrea. The church, they wanted a video done. Oh no, I wanted to do a video because I wanted to do something, and it was like an usher appreciation video. And I got the video shot, but I needed someone to edit the video. But the person who was supposed to edit it couldn't edit it, and so I had to do it. And I didn't know how to edit, and so I had done paper edits before. If you don't know what a paper edit is, it's just basically looking at footage, putting down time codes, like in a script form, giving it to a producer or an editor and saying, "This is what I want."
Mm,
Mhm.
Um, and so, when I learned the software by a good a good person at church, her name is Michael Bobo. I want to shout her out. She taught me just the basic fundamentals, just how to cut and splice, how to put stuff in the timeline, import, export, just simple stuff. And the other stuff I just kind of learned on my own. But after I learned that, then I said, "Wow, okay, this is new for me. This is a new career for me." And once I got good at it, I started my company, the Savoy Media Group. Savoy is my middle name, Eddie Savoy Bailey. The Savoy Media Group, and I started to do productions, like mini productions or mini, commercials for you. You could say for different, let's say, businesses in the neighborhood, stuff like that that I would charge for. And so I started my own business, and what, and after that, I created a reel. I got to start getting editing jobs as a casting editor. Then I got an editing job at the place where I work at now. And I just kind of built from there. And then, you know, at my job here, that I'm contracted to do weekly, I produce and edit. And so as I started producing and editing different segments, I'm saying, you know what? If you can produce and edit a good 5-minute segment, you can do an hour-long documentary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I said, let me do this. I have to do this. And that's how, and that is the trajectory from me being a PA to being a director and the executive producer of my own film.
Well, I wanted to ask you then, because of your editing experience, um, a lot of the people watching this conference are people kind of like me who have a specialty in something, business or, medical or whatever, their real estate, you name it. But, coming across well, sometimes you're going to be live. So, there's not going to be any editing of that. But a lot of times you're, having interviews that are taped.
Mhm.
What do you look for as an editor when you've got 10 minutes worth of footage of some interview and you've got to cut it down to a 1.5 minute segment to run on the, news broadcast that day? What kind of things stand out to you?
Well, it goes back to the story. You always look for the story. What's the story that I'm trying to tell? That's the first question I ask myself. Well, first I look at the footage and I say, where is the story in this? And when I get an idea of what the story is going to be, then I find footage just to support that. And that's how I come up with my stuff. And sometimes, again, it's sometimes you think you have a story, and then, they don't say something that they need to say that connects everything together. And
Hmm.
so you have to find something else in it. But whatever it is, there is a story there and you have to find it. And if you don't have a story there, then you need to get other outside materials to support a story that you want to tell. Hmm. So that's what I look
True.
for, really. The story. What's the story in this? What am I trying to tell? Once you answer that question, then you can have a focus. And sometimes too that question is not so easy to answer. When I was doing Memphis Magic, it took me 3 years to do the film. Uh,
Mm.
to That's from pre-production to post-production. It's not easy to figure out what your story is about sometimes.
Hmm.
It took me about, almost 2 or 3 years to write a synopsis on what Memphis Magic was about.
Mm.
I just didn't. I mean, I knew I just didn't know how to articulate it. And if you can't articulate it, then you really don't know what it's about, right? And sometimes you have to just allow, like I said before, allow the story to unfold itself so that you can kind of figure out, what story am I telling here? How do I explain this to people? you know,
Hmm.
in the way that they can understand. And once you can do that, then you'll understand it better. And sometimes it's not so easy to do. Sometimes it's very simple and it's very quick, but sometimes it's not easy. And
There.
the synopsis is 2 or 3 lines, and it sounds easy, but it took a lot to get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I know I just have one more question for you, but Eddie, do you have anything else you want to throw in here?
I was just going to say that listening to Eddie and listening to his background, and he's emphasized the story so much. And I think for our viewers that are watching this, that might be on local TV news or might be on a network show like Good Morning America. Um, Obviously, if you're booked because there's a story and they need you now as an expert to chat about that story. So I think my advice to everybody there is know the story that you booked for, right? Find
Mhm.
out, what the producers or the
Right.
writers or the editors need
Right.
and give it to them, right?
Mhm.
And give it to them in, 3 or 4 really good lines that they could use, especially if it's a news piece. They're
Right.
going to edit a little soundbite, right?
Right.
Obviously, if you're on Good Morning America, sitting down in an interview, you might be chatting for minute 30, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, so you have more to talk about. But
Oh,
I love how you're talking about the story.
and you just made me think about something.
Okay.
You talked about GMA. So you and my wife worked together.
Yep.
Memphis Magic premiered on GMA
Yeah, I
a
know.
couple of
I
days
know.
before it came out. So
Yep.
yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, that's very, very true. I mean, you have to know the story. Once you know the story, it's that's like half the battle.
My last question for you is this, just given your unique background, from how you went up through the industry to where you are today. We know that also some of the people that are going to be watching are people that they themselves are upcoming reporters and hopeful anchors, or, you know, reality TV stars. I don't know what, but obviously there's you know, nobody just walks in and is an overnight success. Everybody
Right.
takes their own journey there. What kind of advice do you have for people who are maybe earlier in their career, whether it's in, you know, the broadcasting side or it's in the production side, just to give them, you know, a longer distance perspective on how to succeed in media?
Well, first thing is, it's not for the faint of heart. Um, it's not. I mean, it's one of those industries where it's not so straightforward. The path to success, or, you know, just the path to get your footing in, it's not so straightforward. There are many ways to do it, but I would say listen, learn, try to the best of your ability to put yourself around the right people, learn from them, and try to figure out early, if you can, you know, where you want to be in your in this field. And after you figure whether you want to be a camera guy, an audio guy, there's so many positions that you can play: a producer, a production manager, um, you know. And once you figure that out, then go for it. You know, go for it, and just have an appetite, a healthy appetite, uh, for learning all that you can, and doing all that you can, so that you can be the best that you can be, you know, as whoever you are in this field. And, you know, just believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Believe that you can do it. Believe that you are enough. Um, and you know, with that, you know, can't be stopped.
Love it. I love it. Thank you, Eddie, so much for all
Oh,
your
you know,
great
thank
advice
you
and
for
input
having
and your great stories.
oh, thank you, and thank you for having me.